This is one in an occasional series of events that the Free Speech Project has been having where we try to get to know some person involved in public life in Washington a little better than the headlines permit or than just the anonymous mass of legislation and legislators permits. We did one last year with Congressman Jamie Raskin from nearby Maryland, and we do some larger programs as well, but we're trying to do a number of one-on-ones to get to know people. I want to say that we're going to start today this conversation a little differently from what we intended because of the absolutely horrific events of yesterday in Utah. And I had always planned to note at the start of this event that this is the 24th anniversary of 9/11 today, and to observe that and reiterate our respect for the people we lost at that time. But I think we have a new cause to take a moment of silence and think about someone whom, whether we agreed with him or not, was a major player in American politics at the moment, and who did it, as people have already written, who did it the old-fashioned way, and trying to introduce himself and his ideas to people, and paid the ultimate penalty for that. So just a moment of silence in memory of Charlie Kirk, as well as the victims on 9/11. Thank you. So, Congressman Bacon, you've been in Congress for 10 years from Omaha, and I think a lot of people who had not met you but knew about you and respected your service in the House noticed your decision to retire from Congress, from the House of Representatives, and wondered why. So I think before I quiz you about some details that interest us, we ought to give you a chance to explain and sometimes somebody makes a decision and you realize some things about the decision after you've made it and announced it. And so there may be some more to it than you originally intended or thought. But do you want to take a moment or two to tell us about why I mean, there you were at the fulcrum of...
Hope I'm not done. Okay, first of all, it's great to be with you. This is beautiful. I love it. I was stationed in the Pentagon. I used to jog through here all the time. I'd do these 8-mile jogs, and I was in much better shape. I was 62 right now, but I love running by here and going down the canal and Roosevelt Island, and I scouted everything out from the Pentagon. But it's just a beautiful place here, so thanks for having me. So I have served 10 years in Congress, or will be, and I did 30 years roughly in the Air Force before that. So a few factors came in my thinking about whether or not I want to stay in. First and foremost, I've been married 42 years. I have 4 kids, 8 grandkids, and I've been gone a lot. I mean, I did a lot of deployments, Middle East. I was in the Air Force. Even when I'm home, I was working 12, 14-hour days. Here I'm in D.C. 4 days a week. Back home 3 days a week. Been doing that for 9 years. It will be 10. And I could just tell it was time to do a new chapter, more for family, for one. Secondly, I'm in a district that went for Biden by 6 points. And then I was in a district that went for Harris by 5. And I'm a Republican. I'm a traditional conservative. But it's been a 10-round boxing match every 2 years, literally 10 rounds. And I've been like the number 1 Republican slotted to lose multiple times. And like one year I was the number 1 vulnerable Republican, and we lost 41, and I won by 2. That's my story, a lot, right? And it's just but it's like a 10-round boxing match every 2 years. And you got to have a hunger. I mean, for me to win in this district, there's probably words that aren't the right, I don't know, this whatever this is. You got to have that with a knife in your teeth. And you want to win. You want to defeat the other guy. And you want to do it with civility and decency, but you got to have a hunger to want to work 14, 15-hour days, 7 days a week, shake everybody's hand, don't miss an event. You got to have that hunger to do this. And I wasn't sure if I could do it a sixth time. I think I'm 62. I want to maybe have a different chapter where I can pace myself a little better. So that's the second reason. Third, because I'm in a very purple district, it's very hard to move up the leadership chain. And so when I look at myself, I have finished 4 terms. I'm on my 5th. In the 4th term, I had the most bills passed of any member of Congress, of 435 members. So we were number 1 at getting legislation passed. In the Congress before that, I was number 2 of 435. I've been rated the most bipartisan member of Congress at different times, rated the most effective member of Congress by others at different times. So I felt like I did well, and I was doing well, but I was thinking, what's next?
Felt like you had peaked.
Yeah, I felt okay. Yeah, that's another way of saying it. I felt like I sort of peaked because in my district, it's hard to become a chairman because they want to put somebody in that's going to have a safer district or leadership. And maybe it's ego. I'm not into peaking. I like to think there's another mountain to climb. And so I felt like I could reshuffle the deck. And I got enough time in my life that I can do a third career. I like people like Nikki Haley, Governor Youngkin, folks like that I think are traditional Republicans that I affiliate with. I like to help them out. I like to make a little money, pay off a house. And so there's other things I want to do in life. I like to maybe do a little more TV and things like that. I don't know what, I'm a believer. I have a faith in God, and I feel like God's got a door that will open. I don't know what that door will be, but I just feel like it was time to pivot and do something new. But family was number 1. I mean, I've been married 42 years, and I have been a career guy all the way through where literally, in this job, it's 14 hours a day, 13, 14 hours a day during the week. And you're working Saturdays and Sundays. And at some point, I love my grandkids. I like to do more. So I just felt like it's time to turn the page.
Let's talk a little bit more about being the congressman from Omaha. Omaha, vocabulary is so mixed up these days. I was trying to think how I would, from a distance, having been there maybe once, how I would describe Omaha, and I think of it as a progressive city. But progressive seems to be a loaded word these days. But an enlightened city, I believe it's the home of Warren Buffett, right? He must be one of your number 1 constituents, and
he's definitely an important constituent.
I'll bet he makes his views known too.
He's called me a couple times, but actually he's very gregarious and he's a very tolerant individual. So I've come to admire Warren Buffett. About Omaha itself. So I had 16 assignments in the Air Force. I came from a farm in Illinois, corn and soybeans, beef cattle. And it's a rural Illinois guy. I worked for a congressman at 20 years old. I was a college graduate already at that point. He was my congressman from Illinois. So I lived in 4 continents, had 16 assignments. My wife and I liked Omaha the best of all these places. It was the first place I went to a play, first place I went to a ballet, first place I went to, just culturally, I got my eyes open in Omaha. Forbes rates it the number 1 place in America to live. That's pretty good. For a while, they had the fastest growing economy in America. But right now, our ag economy is slowing us down for various reasons, different speech for that. But it's really a great place to live. It's been rated number 1 by many people, and it's a diverse economy. Of course, agriculture is very important because of the state as a whole. One example, 85% of the world's pivot irrigation sales comes out of Omaha. In the world. Pretty incredible, right? Valmont, Lindsay, things like that. We have the largest private bank of anybody at Omaha. We're the 3rd biggest hub for insurance in America. We have Union Pacific.
Mutual of Omaha.
Mutual of Omaha. It's like 5 or 6 of them, though. They're huge, right? And then we have Mutual of Omaha, Union Pacific, large trucking company, tons of large trucking companies. So it's a big transportation hub as well. So it's very diverse economy, and if you want a job there, you can get one. And work hard, have character, you're going to move up in Omaha.
Is Omaha a diverse city, to pick
Yeah,
up on your word?
it's about 10% African American, 11% Hispanic. Of course, we have some refugees there from Africa right now. It's Ukraine, so it is a pretty diverse. It's a city of 500,000. You throw in suburbs, about a million in the metro area.
And you've had some challenges in those races in Omaha. You've had 5 congressional races,
Right.
and you had to sweat it out sometimes.
So it's officially what they call a D +1 or D +2 district, which means all things being equal, the Democrats should win by 1 or 2 points. And that's mainly because President Trump he lost it in 2020 by 6, as already mentioned. Lost it in 2024 by 5, if you round. That's 4.8 or something. But if you round it, so it's 6 and 5. So that makes it right away a tough district. In fact, of all the Republicans in Congress, I have the biggest Biden and the biggest Harris wins. And so that means you're always a target, the other side. There's some nice Democrats, don't get me wrong, but the campaign guys, they're like, that is a target right there. I mean, because Harris won it by 6, and he won it by 2. So that by definition makes me vulnerable with all the campaign folks. Now, my take on Omaha, and it's shifting Democrat a little bit, but we have this thing called Nebraska nice. And it's really real. Most people are good neighbors. We're not into being a jerk. And I have other words, but I see a camera rolling, so I'll be nice. But even I would say the more moderate, I don't know what's the right words, even many Republicans struggle with President Trump's tone in the way he treats people. Now, you go out farther west in the rural areas, they're much more keen out there. They're a little more... they get more into being rough around the edges and how they talk to people. But in Omaha itself, they don't like the rudeness and the always having to take somebody down all the time. So the way he does business, it's just not conducive. What I'm trying to say is, if you're a pragmatic Republican that treats people decently, you want to meet in the middle, see where you can make an agreement, you can win this district. We just haven't had it at the presidential level for a while. Last guy, Romney won it, or he won it by 7. So it's winnable if you're a pragmatic, reasonable Republican that wants to treat people, even on the other side of the aisle, with respect.
So, if I were reporting on what you just said, you're saying it's a place where being a member of the Republican majority in Congress does not necessarily feel the same as it does from other places. You have to be watching your left flank or your right flank, and what did it feel like when you first came? Did you?
When I first came, I agreed with President Trump on a lot of policy issues, but some of the things that was said, you're like, well, that's not the right way to. Calling different countries shitholes and things like that. I mean, I
you
just
didn't like that. You didn't approve
No, it's
of
not
that.
really. In fact, I already said I'm a believer. I believe in the golden rule. I think the New Testament teaches us to be gracious to people, even if you disagree with them. So it really didn't fit well in that kind of dialogue. But that said, I wanted a stronger military. I wanted a more competitive tax code. Our corporate taxes were the highest in the world at that point. So a lot of things on platform I could agree with, but a lot of the way we treat people was different. So it was a little awkward. It was always not the neatest fit for me. In fact, I was a Rubio supporter in 2016, and so that was.
So you have an in at the State Department now.
Yes. But it got a little awkward then after 2020. I voted to certify the elections. I thought it was our constitutional duty. Not to say there was factors in the election. Mail-in balloting changes the election, but it's legal, right? Yeah.
How many members of the Republican majority in the House voted to certify the result?
It was over 100, but not the majority. If that does, what I'm saying. So it was. It wasn't more than half voted not to certify. One of the states. We've had to be candid, and I talked to people back home. They're like, "Don, it was stolen." I go, everything was legal, right? Or if there was any law breaking, it wasn't enough to change the election results. But if you want to do a book on this, yeah, the mail-in ballots helped out the Democrats. They were doing mail-in balloting. It was legal. Well, it was totally legal, but they were able to drive up their numbers. And we had our nominees saying, don't do it. Well, if the other side's mail-in balloting, we're not, you're going to get beat. And they were able to drive up the score in California and other places. And we had folks like Zuckerberg put a lot of money in key districts. That's legal. It helped out one side. So in other words, I could say that there was things that helped the opposition to President Trump, but it was all legal. Okay, so that's if you find a little nuance, that's the facts.
May I call you Don?
Yes. In fact, my Air Force call sign's Bacon Bits.
You just mentioned an incident in the cabinet room when President Trump made in his first term, made a reference to other countries. You said it, so I'll allow myself to say it, that he talked about shithole countries. There's a somewhat famous column that was written at the time in the Washington Post by, actually he's an architecture critic, and he said, grown men sat there, he said men in particular, sat there and squirmed in their seats a little bit, laughed a little bit, but they felt uncomfortable being there with the President of the United States using language like that in public. One might imagine people would use that kind of language in private, but using language like that in public to refer to other countries and other people. Do you think more people were uncomfortable with that than admitted it at the time?
Yeah, and I think even today, I mean, there's a decorum we expect from our president and our public officials, and I don't think we're meeting it right now. Now, I could talk for hours. Why is that? How did we get here? I mean, that's a whole other speech too. But we're there now, and the decorum is not where we want it. Ronald Reagan's my role model in my lifetime. And he was always I think a very decent individual. He had a high decorum for the office. He wouldn't go in without a tie, for example, there. And he's what got me involved. I was 13 years old when he ran in 1976. I go, that's what I like, right? I've been there ever since. I haven't changed. And so, but a little bit back to a little point. My journey involves this thing in 2020 where I voted to certify. I was a supporter of infrastructure. I voted for some things that suddenly became unpopular on our side of the aisle, though they were popular a year before. And I didn't really understand. I said, you can't be for infrastructure and a year later against it, right? Just because you got a new president. Make a long story short, I ended up getting President Trump tried to recruit a primary opponent, came out and campaigned in 2022, and I had like 4 years of any GOP opposed to me because I didn't toe the party line. I did what I thought was right, and we won. And so I think I have a little bit outside a speaker's fight that I was in the middle of that was very brutal. I guess what I'm communicating, I went through a baptism in fire, and I always just tried to do what I thought was right, be decent about it, and we won. We won primaries, we won the generals, even though we were not favored many times. So there's so I'd like to encourage you. I believe I'm a man of faith first. I'm an American before I'm a partisan. And I try to always do the right thing, though good people can disagree. There's some tough issues out there. But I really want to encourage you, be a person of principle, do it with decency. And I think people respond to that. And you got to be able to sit down, why did I certify and explain it? Why do I believe infrastructure is important? Why do I believe DACA is important, even though my party is opposed to that? And you got to be able to sit down and engage on it. But I found the voters in Omaha responded, if I was candid and decent.
I have to say that John and I, when we were trying to find a Republican member of the House to sit down and talk with, there were not very many offices that would return our calls.
I have a problem. I answer everybody.
But
I answer every question from journalists. It gets me in trouble.
So we figured this guy has something interesting and different about him from the typical person in the Republican majority in the House. and that we do this. By the way, let me say that we're going to open the program to questions from the audience in a little while, and priority will be given to Georgetown students. That's mostly who's here, but Georgetown students first answer questions. Do we have a floor mic, John? Okay, good. So we'll tell you where that is, and we'll do it in a little while. So I would like to run down a few policies, a few positions of the Trump administration to try to sort of like we're fitting you for a suit, figuring out how do we describe you.
I wish it was a thinner suit than a.
Well, for a journalistic suit.
Okay.
And trying to place you in this spectrum, which is not done very often these days. You're one thing or you're another, and a lot of we don't know a lot of depth. So I just want to ask you things. There's one vote that you took that really stands out. I believe it is the case that you were the only member of the Republican majority in the House to vote against changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. The only one. You were looking at the only person who resisted in the Republican majority who resisted that Donald Trump policy. So what were you thinking, and did it take a lot of courage to do that?
Well, I took a little heat, but that's all right. It's funny. I get people back home. Why would you be against that? Okay, it's been a Gulf of Mexico for 450 years, right? And I'm a patriot. Now, this has helped me learn the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism, I'm a pro-American. I love what we stand for. I love our history. I love our Bill of Rights. That's patriotism. Nationalism is, I'm going to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, which there's a difference. So anyway, I said I was going to vote against it. One of the leadership, and I love him, he's a good man, he says, Don, you got to vote for it. The president, he's very emotional about this. I go, I don't really care. And then he goes, well, Don, why don't you vote for it? I go, because it's so, this is an honest God discussion, almost verbatim, because it's the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard. And then he goes, Don, I agree. It's very stupid. But if you just vote for it, you get it past you. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. That's not working on me. But that's a little discussion we had. And so, I ended up being the only guy who voted against it. And I don't really understand it because I have this, I think what spurred me on, I could be maybe a little bit negotiable on it. I don't like how we treated Canada. Canada is a sovereign nation. They're our ally. We have an undefended border, the longest undefended border, in the world.
But a lousy relationship at the moment.
Well, at the moment, because we're talking about Governor Trudeau and 51st state, and it doesn't make sense. What did that get us? It got us nothing. Less Canadians are traveling here on tourism now. They're shutting off contracts. What 1 ounce of benefit did us treating Canada like a second-class country get us? Nothing. They're our ally. I don't like how we treated Denmark. I served with the Danes in Afghanistan. The number one per capita European nation for loss of life in Afghanistan, fighting by our side, and we said they weren't really a good ally. That bothers me. What good is that going to do with Denmark, who has a great Air Force? I'm an Air Force guy. They're doing more to help Ukraine than most countries right now. They're a great ally. Greenland, we have a base there. They would let us have 5 bases there if we wanted, and they would let us mine rare earth minerals if we wanted. Why are we treating them like we want to make them our territory? None of this stuff makes sense. It's nationalism, but it's foolishness. It's not patriotism. And I think that all that background fueled me for the Gulf of America, or to oppose it.
Right. To take something just very recent, I think last week or so, there is a congresswoman from New Jersey who the Justice Department was intending to indict for her protest outside a refugee detention center, if I'm not mistaken, or Congresswoman McIver. And I think it's McIver.
Okay.
And do you know her well?
I do not. I've gotten a letter from her. I've never talked to her.
And yet you're one of 5 Republican members of the House who would not go along, who made it impossible to clear the way for her to be punished,
Kicked off committee.
kicked off a committee,
Right.
punished for having protested outside an immigrant processing center. So now you didn't need to do that, and there were 5 people willing to do it, and you carried the day. I mean, the president was prevented, and the attorney general was prevented from doing the things they would have liked to do.
For me, this is pretty simple. Our ethics committee, we have an ethics committee. We have 20 committees in Congress. One of them is the ethics committee, and they are, I think, very bipartisan. They're investigating this, and they're writing a report. And so my view of it is wait till the ethics committee finishes the report before you censor and then kick her off a committee. And this is the threat. If the Republicans do this before the ethics committee, well, we have people that have done some things that have been appropriate. So we have a member of Congress that they have accusations of domestic violence and some illicit commercial activity being accused. I'm not saying it's true or not, but it's being investigated by the ethics committee.
That's a Republican.
Republican. So my point is there's a due process here. Let the ethics committee give us the report, and if they come back and say, she was wrong, that she physically assaulted an ICE agent, well, she deserves then to be held accountable. But if we do this without the ethics committee, then what's going to prevent, they were going to submit right away for us to censor and remove the Republican off his committee, and we were going to come back and say, well, let's wait for the ethics committee. I don't like a dual standard. I don't like hypocrisy. So I like following a process. I voted to kick Santos out of Congress after the ethics committee came out and said, yeah, he stole, he lied. And so I think there should be a process here. Now, what happens when we're in the minority and we have a guy that's accused of domestic assault, but it's not been proven, it's being investigated? Now, the Democrats, okay, we're censoring you, we're kicking you off committee. And they say, wait till the ethics committee. So I just want to follow due process.
So the ethics committee is bipartisan?
Yes, it's half and half. It's 50-50.
Exactly half and half.
Right. And so, and they're handpicked to be rational, reasonable people, and they're good people. And
they're generally pretty well respected.
Yes, they're folks that they're not the flamethrowers you see on TV. Normally they're not on TV a whole lot. These guys.
Right, right. Well, Russia and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So she served 30 years in the Air Force, so I have a feeling you have some sophistication about military issues. I'm not trying to praise you. I'm trying to understand who this is coming from. And you are bothered by President Trump's temptation, I want to try to use neutral words, not to take such a strong position on behalf of Ukraine. In fact, I think the language you used was that he was treating Mr. Putin with velvet gloves.
Yep. I have like 10 quotes. That's one.
Right.
So I've studied Russia since I was 18. That was one of my focus areas as a bachelor's degree. That was in the intelligence career field. And then in electronic warfare, I flew missions off their coast all the time. I've studied Russia my whole life, or Soviet Union. And I also love history. And if you look at World War II, just one example, you could do hundreds of these. 1938, Hitler was a threat, a growing threat. They were demanding land from the Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, made demands. Neville Chamberlain, the French president, goes there. They say, okay, we'll offer you Sudetenland. But
English Prime Minister.
Yeah, the English Prime Minister.
Right.
And we're going to offer you land from Czechoslovakia, though the Czechoslovakian leader's not even in the room. And then you're going to guarantee us peace. And Hitler's like, yes, that's all I want. And so then they offered up land from Czechoslovakia against the wishes of the leadership of Czechoslovakia. And they said, they came back, we got peace in our time. That was the quote. Well, the next year, a few months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. And then, in 1939, they invaded Poland. We got World War II. You got to stand up to a bully. Russia invaded Ukraine. Why? Not because of NATO, not because of any of this stuff. They're invading Ukraine because he has this dream of Peter the Great. He wants to, Ukraine's been there for off and on for a couple centuries, part of their country. He's an imperialist, if I can pronounce that right at the moment. He sees the Ukrainians as little Russians. That's what they call them. They don't want them to have their language. They don't want them to have their history. They want to make them a vassal state of Russia. That's his goal. Ukraine, no, they like their language. They have been abused by the Russians for centuries.
Oh, under Stalin, they were treated
4 million Ukrainians were killed in 1933, purposely by Stalin.
in 1 year.
In Ukraine, in 1 year.
A famine.
So, the Holodomor, if you read up on it. I just finished a book on it by Applebaum. It's a good book. And so, but the Russians gave them their independence in 1991 or 92. And Ukraine has made a decision. We want to be part of the West. We want to have freedom and democracy. We want free markets. We want rule of law. We don't want graft and fraud. We want to be like the West. We want to be part of the EU. We'd love to be part of NATO, but we wouldn't allow them to do it. Russia couldn't handle that, so they invade them. And I just think as Americans, we got to stand up to that and the whole free world. And we do that by giving them weapons that they need and secondary sanctions on Russia to hold at risk their exports on oil and gas. That's what we need to do. If Russia prevails, they will take Moldova, Georgia. I think the Baltics are under serious threat, and they know it. We're on the tipping point of
They'll
a world war.
reconstruct the Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's what he wants to do. But if we are weak and we are an apologist for what Putin's doing, the odds of war are go up. And so I see myself as a Reagan guy in this. We stand up against a bully. We have peace and strength. We're not in this war, but we're helping Ukraine with the weapons, the ATACMS, long-range munitions, and we got to break Putin's will. And we also got to go after his economy.
Just a little footnote here. I meant to say it before when you mentioned Reagan. A number of the judges, federal judges right now, who are giving Donald Trump the hardest time and are having the biggest fights with him over their rulings and with the Supreme Court, were originally named federal judges by Ronald Reagan. The chief judge in D.C. is one. There's one in Boston that the Supreme Court forced to apologize the other day. These are Reagan judges. These don't have to. But just to extend the Ukraine thing for a moment, why do you think? What is his personal motive or inclination for treating Putin with velvet gloves?
I think it's very fair. In this case, for me, I think it's important to be fair in how I criticize the president, being I'm in the same party. So I've applauded what he's done with Iran. So, for example, I think I got to show willingness to say I support this.
I told you I was going to ask you about the places where you publicly disagree.
I just want to let people know, I think when you're in the same party, you got to be willing to, when you see something you agree with, you got to say it. But in this case, I really disagree. Now, I criticize Biden, too, because Biden was always a year late with the latest weapons and then put restrictions on them. And it drug his feet. And Sullivan, the national security advisor, was always worried about escalating and what Russia would do.
They were a little ambivalent about
so
that.
I would give him like a C-, right? Somewhere in there. So I critiqued him, but I'd like to see an A. Our president now is getting worse than a C-. He is not really reluctant on sending the weapons that we need. A fraction of what we were sending under Biden. And he's also putting restrictions on the weapons we're sending. It's not him, it's the undersecretary in the Pentagon's doing this, which I've called for him to be fired, and because I don't think he's a good leader, this undersecretary in the Pentagon. So I feel like what we're doing is worse than what we did under Biden. And why is he doing it? That's a good question. I don't think we really know. I think part of this goes back to 2018 and 19 on the first phone call with him and Zelensky. Could be a little bit of that. I think he feels like he was wrongfully accused of colluding with Putin during the 2016 campaign. Mueller said that didn't happen, though Russia wasn't trying to involve himself in our campaign. That's separate from Trump's involvement, and Mueller said there wasn't that connection. But I think he still carries that baggage to a degree. I also think he has businesses there. I really don't know why, but he has a blind spot on Putin. I call it a blind spot. Now, I also think he has a philosophy that's different than mine. As a Reagan Republican, and I'd like to talk about the history of the Republican Party dating back from the 30s, because there's two DNA that we have, and I'm on one DNA and Trump's on the other DNA of this Republican Party dating back from the 30s, but I can come back to that. What I believe is Reagan Republican, the United States is the indispensable power for freedom. We're not the only power. We can't do it by ourselves. Russia, China, Iran, we can't do it all alone. But without America, the free world will die on the vine. We got to be a vocal leader for freedom and the values that we support. And you got to stem to bullies. Doesn't mean you got to do all your manpower. We don't have to send servicemen and women there. You can't. We've learned to be careful about that. But we should help out countries that are defending their freedoms and democracy, free markets. He has a different view. It's so-called a total realism view. Mine's probably a blend of idealism and realism. But his view is more, we are a superpower, Russia's a superpower, China's a superpower, and that the world revolves around these three superpower leaders, and it's between us to make these deals. I think he has a little bit of that mindset.
How's that working?
Well, I don't think it's the right way to look at it. I believe in values. What makes America great? It's our Bill of Rights. It's the chance that we have representative government. We get to pick leaders and we delegate power to them. And every 2 to 4 years we remeasure whether we want to keep it the same. That's what makes us great. It's not because of our blood or DNA or anything like that.
A couple other issues, sort of a rapid round here. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just recently revised its estimates of the jobs. I think it was June they revised. And the president fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. He didn't like the report. There have actually been worse reports since then, so I'm not sure to pursue it. But you objected to his firing the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and pretty publicly, too, I think.
By the way, they went back and revised all of last year's down too.
Now it's
so
month after month.
I'm not an economist, but obviously we need better data because you can only make decisions on good data, right? You got to have when you make decisions. I'm a 5-time commander in the Air Force. You got goals, you got a vision, you got what you want to do, and you got to have data, and you got to be able to have data you can trust. And so when the president got this data that from this lady, I can't think of her name. And then he fired her. That's not a good way to. I think there should have been a discussion. Why is the data off? Why did it change? What do we got to do to fix it? I think you should go down that path instead of just firing someone willy-nilly. But when you fire someone that you don't like the data, then people start fearing telling you the truth, and then you don't know if you're getting good data or not. And as an American, I want good data. I want to know: is the economy growing? Is it shrinking? Is employment going up or down? Is inflation going up or down? And that's how the banks make decisions on interest rates. You got to have data the best data you can have to trust. And when you fire someone for having data that you don't like, you undermine that. And we've seen this work. I mean, I've studied Stalin, I studied Hitler, I studied Mao. Mao killed like 60 million of his own people. Do you think they told him the truth? They told him what he wanted to hear. And my point is, when you're in an authoritative system, people don't tell you the truth. They tell you what you want to hear. And then you make bad decisions and the country doesn't, thrive. So we want good data, and you gotta have somebody able to tell you the truth if it's not good. And I do find it interesting they went back subsequently and the whole last year's data is off. So there probably needs to be an evaluation of how we're making
wrong,
coming up with the data, and we should make it better.
Right. A sensitive one for some people, including me, because I used to work at NPR. The president put in his so-called big, beautiful bill a total cut of federal funding to public broadcasting, a rescission, taking back money that had already been appropriated for NPR and PBS. Right. You, from Omaha, are a supporter of PBS and of NPR, I believe. And there were some people who were writing that you might vote against the big, beautiful bill, not only because of that, but because of some other things that were there. And then you didn't vote against that bill, despite what happened to public broadcasting. How do you explain that?
So there's 2 different bills involved here. And
okay.
By the way, I'm not following you on this. I was at a town hall the other day. I said, you voted for the big, beautiful bill and it had tariffs in it. And I go, it did not. And I go, yes, it did. And I go, it did not. That's strictly a presidential thing,
Right.
tariffs, right? So you get some confusion going on. So the big beautiful bill did not cut I call it the reconciliation bill because I hate calling it the big beautiful bill. There's some things, a lot of things I liked in it, some things I didn't. But the reconciliation bill didn't have anything about PBS or NPR.
I'm sorry, I said
but it was the
correctly.
rescissions bill.
Yeah.
And so the rescissions bill, so this is money we budgeted last year that President Biden signed, it's appropriated, and the president came back and says, I want to cut $9 billion. Now, he just can't do that. Now, he was trying to do it, but the courts say you can't because it's already been appropriated, signed by the president. This is our Constitution 101. And so he says, okay, well, we have a measure. Okay, I want to cut $9 billion of our appropriated money, but I got to have your approval. But to do this, you don't have to have a filibuster in the Senate. So so this is some of the nuance of how to do rescissions. So when it came to us, I said, well, I'm not going to vote for a bill that cuts PEPFAR. And PEPFAR is the George Bush program that fights AIDS in Africa. It saved 27 million lives. It prevented over 3 million babies being born to HIV moms to not have HIV. It's a great program. It's a noble program.
That's another one. The Global Fund for AIDS.
Yes, PEPFAR. And I can't remember what it stands for acronym-wise, but it's about fighting AIDS in Africa, and it saved 27 million lives is the estimate. And so I was able to get 92% of it restored. And then I said, well, I don't like cutting PBS. And I'm not too, NPR was 1% of our funding, just 1%, so it's not a big issue.
It's a small amount.
Yeah, so it's 1%, so I just sort of backed off that.
It's going to kill some rural stations in
now
states like Nebraska.
PBS, so this is a different issue. And so then they said, well, we want to cut the corporate PBS in D.C. I really don't care about that. I'm just being honest. I'm more worried about the local media
Right.
all over our country. And I said, I cannot vote for it because PBS gives us our tornado warnings and a whole bunch of stuff in Nebraska. So I voted no. And I'm sitting in the cloakroom. This is how the sausage is made, unfortunately. I hate to say that with the name Bacon. So try to give you a little humor. So I'm sitting there by myself, and the speaker sits next to me. And I go, this is going to be awkward. And he goes, Don, you voted no. And I go, I told you I was going to vote no. And I said, I got PEPFAR, yes, but I didn't get PBS. And he goes, so what do you want? I said, I want local PBS funded. So he gets up, they huddle. He comes back, it will be done. So what do you do? So I voted for it because it's going to be in this appropriations bill process. Now, that said, we're having an appropriations bill right now, and we're fighting over this, right? And so I'm not sure it's going to be in the appropriations bill, but I said,
So he may not be keeping his word.
well, he's not in that committee, but I told him, the speaker promised me, and the chairman agrees with me. However, the votes weren't there. So I said, guys, you can only lose 3 votes on the floor. I will not vote for an appropriations bill that does not have that in there. So that's where we're at right now. Right now, this appropriations bill is being hashed out with PBS.
So the public broadcasting money could be restored.
It could be. Now, there's a guy named Amadai. He's a good friend of mine from Nevada. He's from northern Nevada. It's his amendment to restore PBS funding. And it didn't pass in committee, but we're going to put it on the floor for a vote. So
you haven't given up on that.
I'm not giving up, no. But I'm just telling you, I'm just giving you a feel for this is how the system works a little bit, right?
Okay,
This is one issue.
in just
What is it going to take for you to vote yes?
In just a moment, I'm going to see
funding.
if there are any questions from the floor. But before we go there, from Georgetown students, but before we go there, I want to ask you, I mean, we can't go over every single issue of policy and give you a score like a political action committee or something, but there are quite a few things you disagree with the Trump administration about and with the majority in Congress. So have you considered becoming a Democrat?
No, I have not. I am a Reagan Republican through and through. So this goes back to, I mentioned this, I referred to this earlier. In the 1930s and before, Republicans were isolationists, protectionists. They liked high tariffs. Smoot-Hartley, 2 Republicans that gave us high tariffs, gave us the worst depression. It made our depression worse in the 30s. Anti-immigration. This is sort of our DNA from the 30s before. Now, Abraham Lincoln, I love him. He's one of my favorite president. But he was a protectionist. He wanted high tariffs. I love what he stood for in the abolitionist movement and all that. But after World War II, most Republicans said, you know what, isolation doesn't work, protectionism doesn't work, legal immigration is good. Now, we had a fight in 1952. A guy named by Taft was the lead to win our primary in 1952. He wanted to get us out of NATO. He wanted back to tariffs. He wanted to take us back to the 1930s. But a guy named by Ike Eisenhower says, I'm not going to let you do it. I'm going to run as a Republican, and I'm going to run as a peace through strength. We have a role in NATO. We're a leader of the free world, free trade. The traditional Republican views that I believe in today, that Ronald Reagan embodied further from what Eisenhower created. We've been that party for about 70 years. Peace through strength, strong alliances, free trade, legal immigration. But today, we're split down the middle again. Some of the folks want to go back to the 1930s. You'll find that President Trump talks about McKinley, because McKinley was a high tariff guy, right? So I would say today we're having a fight for the soul of our party. Are we going to be the post-World War II party? Or are we going to be the 1930s party?
Well, he's using a phrase, America First,
which is a 1930s Republican phrase.
Against becoming involved in World War II.
Right, yes.
And nobody seems to notice.
Yeah.
That it
I have.
goes back there, right. Yeah. So if you and a couple other people, Republican men or women, like 4, were to decide, instead of leaving Congress, to say, well, this is not what we signed up for, we're going to go over to the other side. That just isn't done, huh?
Well, because I'm not a Democrat, I'm a Reagan Republican. Now, it's interesting. The Democrats are under evolution right now. I was in the elevator the other day, and a Democrat says, Don, thanks for sitting up to Russia and supporting free trade. I go, dang it, you're Ronald Reagan. How did this happen? How do we get, in the 1970s, the Democrats wanted tariffs. We have a very convoluted thing going on. But I think there is some divides on social issues that are hard to bridge, as a faith-based guy. So there's some, I'm just going to be my own guy on this stuff. And you run on what you believe, and you do what you run on, and then you run and defend it. And
in
that's
the
what
Senate, you could be an independent and get away with it. But in the House, that would be pretty hard, I think.
So we have a speaker today. If you look at the history of it, I had a big part in that. But the alternative would have been, if you this is a whole different speech. I went, one week I took 31,000 phone calls. My wife was threatened. All my supporters were threatened over the speaker's fight. But we didn't back down. And
that was because you opposed Jim Jordan.
Yeah, I opposed the 8 people who got rid of Kevin McCarthy for Jim Jordan. And then when we voted for Steve Scalise to be the speaker, and how this works, if you're the majority, you have a private caucus. The people run and say, this is what we want to do. And then you vote. And if you don't have 50%, you keep taking out the last place guy until you get to 2. Then whoever wins, that's your speaker nominee. And you're all supposed to support them. And we had, out of 223 Republicans, we had 215 definitely supported McCarthy. But 8 did not. But you had to have 218 on the floor. So 8 people dethroned Kevin McCarthy. And then we voted for Steve Scalise pretty overwhelmingly. 8 people said, we'll never vote for him, only for Jim Jordan. And my thing wasn't so much against Jim Jordan. You can't let 8 people dictate to 235 people who's going to be your speaker. And so on principle, I told the 8, you're never going to get who you want. That was a hell of a fight for a week. So,
but you played a role.
Well, it was on principle. We had to teach 8 people, you don't get to run the House.
Right.
And it's pretty basic. Right. That's what was going on.
Let's see if there are any questions of yours. There are quite a few. So make them speak loudly and try to make your questions concise so we can fit in as many as possible. We have a stop time of 12:45, I believe. So we have 20 minutes.
Hi, my name is Emily. I just have a question about...
It needs to be louder.
Oh, sorry.
I hear it, though. I got it.
Sorry. You mentioned earlier that you're facing right now a fight for the soul of your party. And you mentioned how you and President Trump are on 2 different stands of DNA since Reagan. Right now, President Trump is in the White House. He has a majority in the courts. He has all of his supporters. You know, he has a majority in the Senate and the House. All of his supporters are running all of our bureaus, the State Department, the Department of Defense. Everything's run by him. Most of his party believes that the election was stolen in 2020. They believe that there was even more corruption in the 2024 one. Are you sure that you haven't already lost?
That's a good. I'll tell you more in about 4 years, because we're gonna have some more elections, and he's not gonna run again. People say he is, but he's not. But we're gonna have to have this debate. Now, I would tell you a little bit different on the courts, and you already alluded to it. A lot of the courts, the conservative judges, are not supporting him. You'll find, okay, does he have a right to fire people? They'll say, yes, you do. He's the executive branch. He's the president. He gets to. Does he have a right to, on his own, not obey a law that was passed by Congress and signed by the president? Every single time, the courts have ruled against him. Because we have what I would call strict interpretationists of the Constitution, primarily in the Supreme Court. Yes, they're conservative. A lot of them were put in by him. But they believe in the Constitution as it is written, not as you want it to read, as it's written. And it's pretty open and shut. If the Congress passes a law, a president signs it, you just can't say, I'm not going to do it. And he's losing every single fight on that. And so the courts have been intervening on our behalf. So the problem is, on the Republican side, not everybody's in on this with him, but they want to give him a chance because he won. And we won the House, won the Senate. So a lot of folks, I'm not saying for everybody, but generally people want to give him a chance. But there is growing pushback on tariffs. Our party's been built on free trade, right? And I don't see that it's been going a good direction, frankly. We're losing jobs. We're losing manufacturing jobs. The farm economy is struggling right now. I think that you're going to see more pushback as time goes on. On Ukraine, I just signed a discharge petition today. It takes 4 of us to get a pro-Ukraine bill on the floor. We just passed a pro-Ukraine bill, but it's a small package in our defense bill. I think we need a big package. And so I put my name on a discharge petition to force a vote.
Only four Republicans.
Yeah, but right now it's a Democrat bill. I just put my name on it. I'm the first. And if we get 4, then by law it has to be voted on. And the votes are there. So I think on the surface, you're right. Senate, the House, the President held. People want to give them a chance, but I think in the end, we are the party that stands up to Russia. We're a free trade party. Maybe not. Well, we're going to have 2 or 3 more elections here down the road, and we're going to see more. But I'm not willing to sit on the sidelines and pretend that this is all right, right? And so that's why I'm speaking up. Now, I don't disagree with them on everything. There are some things that I think, okay, I agree on. We had to secure the border, 12,000 people a day. That's why the president won. And so I think a lot of people voted for the president because of the border and inflation. They didn't vote for tariffs, but they got that with it. And I think that's something the president, I don't think he realizes that people didn't vote for that.
Today's headlines say inflation's going back up.
It ticked up to 2.9 today, which compared to 9% under Biden at its peak. It's different, but it's ticking up. And interesting enough, they don't count a lot of things that inflation is really high in. The way they do this math, the areas that inflation is most vulnerable right now, they don't consider it in the equation. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but like food isn't considered. Should be.
Next question.
Wow, we got.
Yeah.
Thank you, Congressman Bacon. My name is James.
What's your name?
James. I'm from New York. I was just wondering, considering that you have made the decision to retire from the House.
James, you have to speak louder.
Considering that you've made the decision to retire from the House at the end of this session, what do you think that it could mean for your legacy, for the potential to be replaced by someone who's handpicked by President Trump, given your strong disagreements with the president?
Well, it won't be handpicked by President Trump. In the Senate, the governors get to pick if you withdraw. I'm not going to get out before the end of the term. But if I did, in the House, you have a special election. So you're going to have an election. And the House can only be determined by election. Whereas in the Senate, if you say I resign, the governor gets to appoint a replacement until the next election. But in this case, the President Trump didn't win our district. He lost by 5 this last time. So it's going to be a tough fight. I wouldn't. It's a even fight between the Republican and Democrat for the next one. But won 5 times. I've been in, will be 10 years. There's always a reason to run again. But I just thought the time was a transition now. Now, I would like to get involved with people I like nationally and help them win the presidency. So I'm not going to retire. I'd like to, work in Omaha, come home at night, and I'd like to do some TV. So I'm not by no means retiring. I'm just done with the 2-year election cycle. I raised $6.5 million last cycle. My opponent raised $7.5 million. And it was a dogfight the whole way through. How many times do you want to do that? Maybe some people are gluttons for punishment. I'm not.
Hello, my name is Victoria. I see that there's less and less Reagan Republicans and more nationalism going on in the Republican Party. What do you see as the absolute best case scenario in the remainder of Trump's term with things like Ukraine or with the National Guard being sent in? And as a follow-up, what key political figures do you think across the board we should be monitoring and you think gives us some hope?
Good question.
Yeah, it is very good hope, very good question, and it's a hard one. I think someone like Governor Youngkin from Virginia offers a Reagan Republican. Pence is clearly that, but he didn't do well in the last primary. But my point is, they're out there, and we're gonna have to make our case. So this populism thing is tied to nationalism. It's not patriotism, in my view. But what I find in populism, they're always got to have a bad guy. You got to have an enemy, and that other guy, they're terrible over there, and that's not a unifying message in the long run. I think if there is some losses on the populism side, people are forced to have to relook. The Democrats ran a populist 3 elections in a row, William Bryant, and they finally said, hey, this ain't working. They ended up with Woodrow Wilson, who won. But my point being is losses make people reflect. And so it's going to take a loss or two on our side to say, populism or nationalism or whatever you want to call it doesn't work. And President Trump has been uniquely positioned to. Right, there's a bit of psychology going on here. Why did his message register? Well, if you look in the last 4 years, Afghanistan. I mean, for me as a veteran, I was never so mad in my life with what happened. The border. And there was a lot of this perception of craziness in our universities, in our hiring, and I just think people just say, okay, we're going over here again, right? I do think there's a desire for normalcy a little bit and a little bit of less chaos. There was a guy that ran in 1920 after Woodrow Wilson, and his campaign was return to normalcy. And I think that's what we want right now.
Warren G. Harding.
Yes. Did you vote for him?
What? I'm sorry?
I'm just teasing. I was teasing you.
Almost.
Hi, my name's Alan. I'm from Massachusetts. I was wondering if you could give one piece of advice to Democrats. I think you just said, losses require reflection. What would be your biggest piece of advice to reach across the aisle and try to come to some common ground?
That's a fair question.
Yeah. I would say if you're a rational, reasonable, pragmatic Democrat, you're going to compete well. In our district, you would. I think the social issues, and I say this, people in here may not agree, but I'm just giving you my outside view. The Democrat Party went pretty off kilter on some of the social issues, with the sports issues and things like that. And that was an 80-20 issue. And President Trump really used it in the campaign and the targeted ads and key areas. And so I think that's an area that it cost. Okay, this is a sensitive issue, but on the pro-life, pro-choice issue, I think if you, as a faith-based guy, I tend to be more on the pro-life side. But when my opponent in my district wants 0 restrictions, even right before birth, that's another 70-30 issue in our district. So I think there's some of the social issues. The Democrats were on the 20 or 30% issue there, and it was not seen as
Omaha just elected a Democratic mayor, didn't it?
Yep, sure. After 12 years of a Republican mayor. And by the way, the Democrats have an advantage in registration there. The fact that we had a Republican mayor there for 12 years was probably the bigger story out of that, right? But I would say they're, you know, I work with guys like Tom Swazi. He's from New Jersey. He's from actually Long Island, right? Josh Gottheimer. These guys sit with you and they make a deal. I think those guys win in tough districts because they're able to reach in all. If you want to win in America, right? It's 50-50 nation right now, roughly. You got to win the middle. You got to win the moderate swing voters, the independent voters, and so a Democrat has to do that. And I love studying elections. I'm a junkie. I've been doing this since I was 13 on this stuff. If you look what happened to Harris, so Biden was polling at 39%. He could not win. In fact, the fact that he ran in the primaries is the reason the Democrats lost. He could not win, and he was not able to win physically. I mean, it happens. Father Time wins, and that's what Leader McConnell says, and it's an accurate statement. But he was polling at 39%, and then after that debate, they saw there's no way he can win, so he withdraws. Now Harris is given the nomination without a single primary. She had an uphill battle already climbed. But the kiss of death was when they asked her, what is the one thing you would do differently than Joe Biden? And she said nothing. And Joe Biden was polling at 39%. She had to have something. She had to have something that I would have done this differently or that. And Joe Biden would have to swallow his pride, right? And that was the problem. He was pressuring her. There should be no daylight between us, right? That's a little more than what you asked, but I'm just giving you my perspective of how this election went down last time.
Hi, my name's Greg. My question relates to a recent airstrike that was conducted off the coast of Venezuela. Mm-hmm. There was the airstrike conducted. The individuals on the boat were part of an organization that's been designated a terrorist organization by the executive branch. There was not an authorization for the use of military force or a declaration of war. You sit on the House Armed Services Committee. Do you think that was the right call? And if yes or if no, do you think that there's a role for Congress and what role that should be? And then is that going to happen?
They have been listed as a combatant, the narco folks. So we've given them the definition, or at least we've labeled them as a combatant. And that's what he's been using as a reason to do it. Now, would I do that as a president? I probably would have done it differently. But I'll give you advice that a four-star general gave me when I was a lieutenant colonel or major. He says, Don, if you've never fallen on your sword, there's something wrong. If you're falling on your sword every day, there's something wrong. So my point to you, I have to pick and choose my battles. And am I going to pick and choose a battle of terror or the narco guys who are killing 100,000 Americans a year on fentanyl? I'm just being candid with you. I know people who've died from fentanyl. In fact, I'm the oldest of 9 in my family, and I lost 3 brothers through drugs, and younger brothers, half brothers. But my point being is, I just decided I'm not going to pick that battle because these guys are killing 100,000 people a year on average, the fentanyl guys, and they are labeled as combatants. Now, if I was the president, I probably would go about this differently. I do think there's, they're more in the criminal world versus Al Qaeda or they're got to differentiate how you label them and and what kind of enemies they are to target them militarily. So I probably would do it differently if I was in charge. But I just decided, am I going to yell and scream about guys who are running drugs in our country? And I know a young guy that was a bartender, thought he was taking a harmless drug one night, had fentanyl in it, and he's dead. This is a story all over our country right now, and it's a poison. So I'm giving you an honest answer.
How about the vice president's public reaction when he was asked about that? He said, we've set the precedent of using the word already in this conversation. He said, I don't give a shit.
Right.
The vice president of the United States said that.
Yeah. In your defense and what you're saying, we are a nation of laws, and we're supposed to follow laws. There's some ambiguity here because we've labeled them as a combatant or an enemy. I don't think I got the right words, but you know what I'm trying to say. And so they're labeled as that, and They got the military deployed down there to go after him. I think I'd probably have had a more conservative view on how to do this, and I would have used our Coast Guard to arrest these guys. That's probably how I would go about it. But in my hierarchy of needs right now, I want Ukraine to win. And so just laying out, I got things that I find are more important that I want to wrestle with.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm curious, you've spoken a lot about the two ideological camps in the Republican Party and, you know, the Reagans versus the ideals that Trump is espousing. But in reconciling those two ideologies, I think the bigger question is the cult of personality that is Donald Trump. I know you said you don't think that Trump will run in 2028, but he is selling Trump 2028 hats in the White House, and it's definitely rhetoric that's going around. So I'm curious, how do you think that, and do you even think it's possible for the Republican Party to move on from that cult of personality? Is it too late or too far down the line? And if it is possible, what reasonable and actionable steps should the party be taking now to do that?
Well, the Constitution's clear. You can only win 2 elections for president, right? I mean, I'm not sure I got the right words, but the Constitution's clear. He can't run again. And by the way, Supreme Court Justice just came out and said this too this past week. And so that's there. I think the cult of personality is roughly how we got here, and he's been able to persuade many people to try to give him a chance. And I think it's a counter reaction to what happened in the previous 4 years, a little bit. Also, I think there was some of that with President Obama and a reaction to Hillary Clinton in 2016, same thing. But if tariffs backfire or Ukraine backfires, I think the cult of personality goes away. There's got to be success, and if there's not success, it will not be sustained. And I don't think the cult of personality is going to last post Trump. I don't think somebody can fill those shoes, but I may be wrong. Yeah, we'll see. That's why I want to get involved. That's why I plan on getting involved. I want to do my part.
We have time for one more quick question, I think. John?
Hello. Sorry. Hi, my name's Akarsh. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a freshman. Congressman Bacon, you mentioned one of your experiences with Speaker Johnson. So I wanted to ask you, in your past 9 years in Congress, what have your experiences with different members of House leadership, particularly speakers, the 3 speakers you've had, Ryan, McCarthy, and Johnson, and especially as a swing district Republican, and also if you could comment on your thoughts on Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries.
By the way, I know Speaker Boehner pretty well too, and he is a personality. He is fun to hang out with. He likes to have a red wine and he likes a cigarette, and but he's funny as could be. So I got to meet him after I got elected. Paul Ryan came out and campaigned with me when I was a challenger. He's an intellectual conservative. He's a Reagan Republican. That's why there's a little bit of push against him, because he wasn't a populist. I liked him. I think he's a good man, and he came out and campaigned for me. I won by 1 point against an incumbent, and I don't think would have won without him coming in the district. He was there for 2 hours and changed the business community in Omaha loved him, right? So it gave him a chance to see who I was when he came in, the business community. So the business community loved Paul Ryan. Kevin McCarthy, the most naturally born politician I've ever met. He is 100% in his DNA. God made him to do what he was doing. He knows your wife's name, your kids' names, your birthdays' names. He knows your top 5 issues. He knew everybody, and even on the Democrat side. And a guy that's made that way, that he knows, hey, it's your son's birthday today, Don. Did you tell him? Hey, we got on the phone. Let me call him. He was built to do this. The biggest fundraiser in the history of the Republican Party, right? And he had a national following, and we won the majority because of him. We wouldn't have had it without him. So this guy was extraordinarily talented at what he did, And then we had a dummy from Florida, I won't say who, but you guys are smart, decided they're going to take him down because they didn't like him for whatever reason. 8 people take him down out of 223. And I don't know. It was self-sabotage. Someone shooting themselves in the foot. But anyway, the guy, whether you liked his policies or not, I was just tell you, the most natural born. We're all made to do certain things. God made him to be this incredible political guy out there. Now, Mike Johnson is one of the most honest, decent guys you'll ever meet. Now, everybody says he's a Bible thumper and this and that, and I'm a believer, but he doesn't talk about it a lot. You see it, though, in his action. He lives the golden rule. He never trashes anybody in private. The ultimate professional at all times. His word, I mean, he's an honest man head to toe. And so he's there today because nobody can dislike him because he's just a good person. So that's my take on the thing. Now, Nancy Pelosi, she's personally really nice to me, but she'd cut my heart out in a campaign in a heartbeat, figuratively. I mean, she put in my, when I was running as a challenger, I was winning 60-40 in polling in my primary, and she decided that I was a threat to the incumbent. She put $500,000 in the primary to beat me, helping out my opponent. That's pretty hard, right? So she is a partisan. I mean, Kevin McCarthy's partisan too. I mean, her whole goal was to build the majority, and she was pretty ruthless at it. So even though one-on-one at Codell, she's been very nice, but I know in the end, I was definitely, what's the right word? When you disposable, yes. I don't really know Hakeem Jeffries well. He's a great speaker. So I say jury's still out on that. But I think he's very inspirational in his speech. I don't always agree with him, but I like how he speaks.
Don Bacon, thank you so much. This is really a remarkable opportunity to hear your inside thoughts about what's going on, and I hope you'll come back and do it again.
I enjoyed it. This is a beautiful room.
Please join me in thanking.
Wine or a scotch any day.
Join me in thanking Congressman Bacon.